लिखी हुई है, पढ़ना जानते हो तो ऊपर एक लाइन लिखी हुई है। पाँच मिनट की ये कैंडल बहुत क्लियरली दिख रही है तुमको। 5 मिनट की ये कैंडल बहुत क्लियरली दिख रही है तुमको। चार्ट यूज करते हो या जो पॉइंट्स आर डिफरेंट फॉर एवरी चार्ट दैट यू यूज। पॉइंट्स आर डिफरेंट फॉर एवरी चार्ट दैट यू यूज। वेंटेज में पॉइंट्स डिफरेंस है, एक्सनेस में पॉइंट्स डिफरेंस है। हो गई है नेक्स्ट कैंडल ओपन भैया, हो गई है नेक्स्ट कैंडल ओपन भैया। ओपन अप हो गया है। देखो लंदन सेशन ओपन अप हो गया है, का मोमेंटम दिखाता है, दिखाता है किस तरफ का मोमेंटम दिखाना चाहिए मार्केट के अंदर। थोड़ा सा तो मूव आना चाहिए मार्केट के अंदर। 28.03 ब्रेकिंग इज इम्पोर्टेंट। 28.03 ब्रेकिंग इज इम्पोर्टेंट। कैंडल क्लोज नहीं किया, कैंडल क्लोज करता है इसके नीचे, क्लोज नहीं किया, कैंडल क्लोज करता है इसके नीचे, देन विल बी गुड फॉर अस। कुछ ज़्यादा खास तो ओपनिंग हुई नहीं है, तगड़े मूव के साथ। तो ओपनिंग हुई नहीं है तगड़े मूव के साथ। 30 पिप का मूव किया है इसने, 30 पिप का मूव किया है इसने। अगर ये 5 मिनट की कैंडल बढ़िया बन जाती है, 4120 तक आ जाती है, बढ़िया बन जाती है, 4120 तक आ जाती है, तो दिस विल बी द फर्स्ट टारगेट 4120। वी विल ट्रेल दी स्टॉप लॉस एट 4135 एंड वी विल ट्रेल दी स्टॉप लॉस एट 4135 देन आफ्टर फर्स्ट टीपी ऑफ कोर्स। First TP of 80 pips. First TP of 80 pips. दिखाओ भैया थोड़ा सा लंदन सेशन का ओपनिंग। भैया थोड़ा सा, थोड़ा मूव लंदन सेशन का ओपनिंग। स्लो है मार्केट, बहुत स्लो चल रहा है, लेकिन स्लो है मार्केट, बहुत स्लो चल रहा है, लेकिन चल रहा है। एक अच्छा सा बड़ा सा कैंडल चाहिए लाल रंग का बस, एक अच्छा सा बड़ा सा कैंडल चाहिए लाल रंग का बस। 30 से 26.8 तो आ गया है, 30 से 26.8 तो आ गया है। होपफुली थोड़ा सा और बिग कैंडल बना दे ये 5 मिनट के टाइम फ्रेम पर, तो कैंडल बना दे ये 5 मिनट के टाइम फ्रेम पर, तो मार्केट के स्वाद आ जाएंगे मार्केट के। 42 पिप का तो कैंडल बन गया है, कैंडल तो ज्यादा बड़ा है, का तो कैंडल बन गया है, कैंडल तो ज्यादा बड़ा है, एंट्री पॉइंट से 42 कैंडल की बात करें तो इट इज दिया है, अगर कैंडल की बात करें तो इट इज ऑफ नियर अबाउट 56 hopefully 2 more minutes and hopefully बढ़िया 2 more minutes and मजा आ जाएगा, बढ़िया मूव मिल जाए तो बढ़िया मजा आ जाएगा। ठीक है गाइस 4125 आ चुका है, ठीक है गाइस 4125 आ चुका है, 50 पिप डाउन हो गया है, डाउन स्टॉप लॉस ट्रेल कर लो। 50 pips have been down, keep your SLS 4134.999, keep your SLS 4134.999, ठीक है, ठीक है। 4134 point you guys can trail your stop loss, you guys can trail your stop loss। कुछ ही पल दूर है हमारे, कुछ ही पल दूर है हमारे फर्स्ट टारगेट से प्राइस, फर्स्ट टारगेट से प्राइस वापस से कॉस्ट पे आके भी बेरिश हो सकता है, काफी देर तक पे आके भी बेरिश हो सकता है, काफी देर तक प्राइस कॉस्ट पर रहा, लगभग 10 मिनट तक प्राइस वाज एट कॉस्ट। जस्ट होपिंग फॉर द फर्स्ट टीपी नाउ, जस्ट होपिंग फॉर द फर्स्ट टीपी नाउ। 35.428 35.428 चाह रही हूँ एक बारी मेजर रेजिस्टेंस लाइन पर आकर अगर सेलिंग ले तो हम उसके अंदर हंट ना हो। लाइन पर आकर अगर सेलिंग ले तो हम उसके अंदर हंट ना हो। 55 पिप्स का प्राइस ने लो लगाया था। 55 पिप्स का प्राइस ने लो लगाया था। ट्रेल्ड आवर स्टॉप लॉस। वी हैव ट्रेल्ड आवर स्टॉप लॉस। हम लोगों ने अपना स्टॉप लॉस छोटा कर लिया है। हम लोगों ने वेटिंग फॉर द फर्स्ट टारगेट ऑफ 80 पिप्स। वेटिंग फॉर द फर्स्ट टारगेट ऑफ 80 पिप्स। 99 पिप 100 पिप का है पहला टारगेट। 99 पिप 100 पिप का है पहला टारगेट। आपका रिस्क रिवॉर्ड 1:20 बन रहा है। क्या बात है। आपका रिस्क रिवॉर्ड 1:20 बन रहा है। क्या बात है। अच्छी बात है। Let's hope for the great momentum, guys. ओपनिंग अच्छी हुई है हमारी लंदन की। ओपनिंग अच्छी हुई है हमारी लंदन की। 1 hour कैंडल इज गुड। 1 hour कैंडल इज गुड। प्रीवियस कैंडल का लो ब्रेक करता है तो वैसे ही बहुत अच्छा मूव आ जाएगा। प्रीवियस कैंडल का लो ब्रेक करता है तो वैसे ही बहुत अच्छा मूव आ जाएगा फॉर श्योर। अभी तो 6-7 मिनट ही हुए हैं मोमेंटम आए हुए। 6-7 मिनट ही हुए हैं मोमेंटम आए हुए। कैंडल ओपन और हमारा स्टॉप लॉस प्रीवियस कैंडल हाई के ऊपर है। और हमारा स्टॉप लॉस 1 आवर के टाइम फ्रेम पर तो बढ़िया दिख रहा है फिलहाल के लिए। 1 आवर के टाइम फ्रेम पर तो बढ़िया दिख रहा है फिलहाल। 15 मिनट के टाइम फ्रेम पर भी इस वाली कैंडल का लो प्राइस ब्रेक कर चुका है। पर भी इस वाली कैंडल का लो प्राइस ब्रेक कर चुका है। फर्स्ट टारगेट टू सी अवर फाइन फर्स्ट टारगेट सून। यहीं पर ही है मेजर मामला। ये ही है यहीं पर ही है मेजर मामला। एट दिस वेरी पॉइंट इफ यू चेक मल्टीपल बॉडीज हैं एट दिस वेरी मल्टीपल बॉडीज है 41-22 मिनट्स के टाइम फ्रेम पर वन बॉडी क्लोज ओपन। 15 मिनट्स के टाइम फ्रेम पर वन बॉडी क्लोज ओपन। मल्टीपल बॉडीज हैं तो ये वाला जोन बॉडीज हैं तो ये वाला जोन भी काफी इंपॉर्टेंट जोन बनता है। तो सेफ्टी के लिए आप इसे ट्रेल भी कर सकते हो। आप इसे ट्रेल भी कर सकते हो। गाइस कैन आल्सो कीप योर फर्स्ट टारगेट एट 41-22 क्योंकि ये एक इंपॉर्टेंट लेवल है। इसको ब्रेक करना थोड़ा सा डिफिकल्ट रहेगा। थोड़ा सा डिफिकल्ट रहेगा। सिंस वी हैव ट्रेल्ड आवर एसएल एज वेल तो हम लोग कर सकते हैं 74 पिप्स पे पहला टारगेट। एसएल फिलहाल 52 का है। फिलहाल 52 का है। 74 पे पहला टारगेट करोगे तो कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है। 1:1.5 हो जाएगा। 22 के ऊपर रखेंगे पहला 22 के ऊपर रखेंगे पहला 41-22.6 41-22 ये वाली जो बॉडीज का ये वाली जो बॉडीज का ओपन क्लोज है यहाँ तक तो प्राइस आना ही यहाँ तक तो प्राइस आना ही चाहिए फॉर श्योर। इसको ब्रेक करेगा तो भाई इसको ब्रेक करेगा तो भाई बहुत सही गिर जाएगा। इट विल बी वेरी गुड। इट विल बी वेरी गुड। जितने भी लॉट साइज से ट्रेड लिया होता है उसका हाफ मिस्टर बीआईबी। This 15 minutes candle is forming very great. Candle is forming very great. 7 minutes are also in our favor. 7 minutes are also in our favor. 5 minutes पर मार्गोजू ओपन था पलटना नहीं चाहिए। This place is of very much importance. बहुत ज़्यादा यहाँ पर प्राइस स्ट्रगल कर चुका है ऑलरेडी। Given a signal towards sell side as well. The ones who have joined the stream, I would like to request everyone to please do like the stream, guys. वही है थोड़ा साइडवेज है तो थोड़ा स्लोली मूव कर रहा है। दैट्स इट। Bounce should not be there. पलटना was not good for us. देखते हैं वापस कॉस्ट पे आके भी गिर सकता है। इसमें कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है। slowly मूव कर रहा है but yes moving। बड़ी देर तक प्राइस ने यहाँ पर होल्ड भी कराया उसके बाद जाके 55 का लो लगाया। Now we are just waiting। 15 minutes seems less boring though। TP 4102। I would not suggest that the prime code। कल से बहुत खराब है मार्केट। कल तो फिर भी मोमेंटम था, आज तो बिल्कुल 3 घंटे होने को हैं। वी आर जस्ट वेटिंग एंड वेटिंग। 3 घंटे से प्राइस ने इतना ज्यादा पेशेंस टेस्ट कर लिया है ना। 30 से 25 43। 3 more minutes पर कैंडल क्लोज है। GBP USD आया थोड़ा नीचे बाउंस कर रहा है। प्रॉफिट में ट्रेल कर लो मिस्टर शिवा रणवीर कार एंड ट्रेल योर स्टॉप लॉस एंड प्रॉफिट। 2 मिनट बाकी हैं 5 मिनट पर क्या चल रहा है की कैंडल अगेन होल्डिंग थोड़ा साइडवेज हो गया है यार। यहाँ से यहाँ तक का सफर तय किया, सेल बनाया, फिर होल्ड किया 15 मिनट तक, फिर मूव किया, फिर वापस मूव आया। Not great। One minute time frame। हाई कॉस्ट पर ही है। देखते हैं नेक्स्ट कैंडल कैसी फॉर्म होती है। अगेन एट कॉस्ट एज मेंशन्ड वापस से कॉस्ट पे आके भी गिर सकता है। 1 मिनट टाइम फ्रेम 15 मिनट। Closing in few seconds on 15 minutes 1 hour candle। I never mentioned that Mr. Priyan। आज बस गोल्ड सुबह से ऐसे हंटिंग कर रहा है, साइडवेज है, साइडवेज है ना। व्हेन द प्राइस इज साइडवेज थोड़ा डिफिकल्टीज हो जाती हैं। बट येट लेट्स सी। I still hope the price will touch the first target at least. हॉच मामला है, हॉच। 1 मिनट पर लोअर हाइस मेंटेन है, 5 मिनट्स पर भी अभी तक तो लोअर हाइस मेंटेन्ड हैं। फिफ्टीन मिनट्स के टाइम फ्रेम की रेजिस्टेंस लाइन यहाँ से आ रही है, अगर ये डबल टॉप बना के यहाँ से फॉल करता है तो मोर इनफ मोर गुड फॉर अस। यही 15 मिनट will decide what will happen in this trade. एक भी बच जाएगा, सेशन क्लोजिंग टाइम भी हो जाएगा। पेशेंस के साथ वेट किया है, स्ट्रेट किया है, the scenario is being bearish on every major time frame, so this should behave well. होपफुली इस रेजिस्टेंस लाइन का प्राइस रेजिस्टेंस ले, डबल टॉप बनाए 5 मिनट पर एंड इट शुड गिव अ फॉल। बस ये ऐसा ना हो कि ये फॉल 38 से ले जाके, क्योंकि भैया आना तो इसमें सेल ही है। पाँच मिनट की कैंडल ने किया है, but the power for the sellers is much needed now. ये साइडवेज मार्केट की गोल्डीबाजी खतरनाक है ट्रेड करने को वैसे। यार 4 घंटे पे तो वही बेरिश है मामला, 3 घंटे पे अभी बाकी है 1 hour 41 minutes yet remaining. दो घंटे पे भी बेरिश है। 1 hour and 2 hour की कैंडल एग्जैक्टली सेम बनी हुई है, पलट सकती है, बट पलटनी नहीं चाहिए। 15 minutes wicks and dojis। ये देखो यहाँ पर जब रेजिस्टेंस लाइन बननी शुरू हुई थी तो रिजेक्शन फॉल लिया था मार्केट ने फॉर श्योर। होपफुली यहाँ पर भी सेम कर रहा है, अपने आप को फॉल नीचे की तरफ ही जाए। पावर बाइंग आई थी लेकिन हाइज ब्रेक नहीं हो पा रहे हैं, यहाँ से सेलर्स ओवर कोशिश कर रहे हैं। सिचुएशंस और मेजर टाइम फ्रेम्स आर बेरिश गाइस। Red closure is necessary for this candle. Breakout. FIU registered exchanges need to be avoided, Mr. Javeer Sandhu. I have given an option for it if you want to spend your crypto आप crypto card का use कर सकते हो Mr. Javeer. If you want to spend your crypto, you can use your crypto card. Buy करने के लिए already मैं आपको तरीका बताऊंगी आप trust wallet से directly buy कर सकते हो trust wallet में hold कर सकते हो directly UPI का use कर सकते हो likewise inventage to avoid the exchanges in between. डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में मिल जाएगी सीनू जी. Price is yet trying to sustain. Hopefully double top ही हो. एकदम खतरनाक ट्रेड बन चुकी है ये हमारे लिए. This trade is testing a lot of patience for us. जब एंट्री मिली तब भी बड़ा पेशेंस टेस्ट किया. 55 पिप्स का लो लगाया and after that it went up again. Again यहाँ पर ऑर्डर्स हैं पेंडिंग ऑर्डर्स हैं तभी प्राइस सस्टेन कर रहा है यहाँ पे. एक ये और बनता है लेवल बट इतना बफर नहीं है हमारे स्टॉप लॉस में. तो ठीक है इससे ज़्यादा लॉस नहीं लेंगे. अब बस झटका ही आएगा जिस भी तरफ आएगा बस झटका ही आएगा. there will be just one bang on candle से कैंडल बनेगी बस. अब क्योंकि ऑलरेडी 12:45 नहीं आया है. The last is 1 PM. 1 बजे तक the trade will get decided. It will either on first TP or on SL. Creating a double top on 5 minutes. Hopefully this works well for us. Cost पे है re-entry करना चाहो तो target 4102 0507 कहीं तक भी रख सकते हो. नहीं जाता मिस्टर अमजाद अली. रिवर्टिंग बैक. अगर अब ये वाला होता है 4124 तो नीचे ही जाएगा ये प्राइस. Next 5 minutes candle will decide the fate of the viewers. Oh yeah. Viewers and the traders, the ones who are into the trade. The re-entry was only at cost. Nowhere else. Cost पे कितनी देर तक प्राइस होल्ड कर रहा है यार. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 7 5 आधे घंटे से ज्यादा प्राइस कॉस्ट पे है. अगर मेरी एंट्री मिस हो गई तो होनी चाहिए तुम्हारी एंट्री मिस. चलो गोली पाजी और मोर जलवा जल्दी से थोड़ा सा और नीचे आ जाओ. हमारा फर्स्ट टीपी दे दो. आपने काइंड ऑफ क्रिएट किया है. नेक भी ब्रेक कर दो. 24 का लो ब्रेक होगा तो नेक ब्रेक होगा तो आएगा at 22. Price have again respected this resistance line. Hopefully ये continue करे. Do you feel being a safe exchange to trade from India or Bluefin with Palau ID? Got no idea about Bluefin, but BingX, I guess it is FI registered. If it is FI registered, then it is same as Binance. एक बारी गूगल कर लो कि FI registered है या नहीं है. ये साली अगली कैंडल बिल्कुल बकवास बन रही है. अपने लॉसेस और कट डाउन कर दो यार, इसमें कोई फायदा नहीं है लॉसेस को लेने का ना. 35 चल ठीक है, 0.4 ही तो है. Let it be. 15 मिनट पे इनविटेशन 5 मिनट पर दिया है. जब तक इस स्कैनर का लो ब्रेक नहीं होगा मज़ा नहीं आएगा. The scandal is good though. बस ये वाला जो प्राइजेस हैं उनको कैंसिल आउट करने की ज़रूरत है. झटका ही आएगा एकदम से मार्केट में लाइकवाइज द स्कैंडल. मेरे हाथ में होता मिस्टर ऑप्शन चौधरी तो मैं तो आपको प्रॉफिटेबल बना चुकी होती. Yes, gold is bit boring today, but when we are in the trade, it did not seems like to be boring anymore, right? जब आप ट्रेड में नहीं होते हो तब लगता है अरे वेट करना पड़ रहा है, अरे मार्केट आया, लेकिन जब आप ट्रेड में होते हो तब आपको चलो मूव करो इन द डायरेक्शन. It doesn't seem that much boring. अरे भैया आधे पौने घंटे से कॉस्ट पे है डेविल. मिस हो गई तो मिस रहने दो अभी फिलहाल. वापस ऊपर नहीं आना चाहिए भैया. कैंडल के लोज ब्रेक नहीं कर रहा है ये साला साइडवेज ही. You can manage your stop losses according to your lot sizes, Mr. Millionaire Life. Lot size manage कर सकते हो आप. So that is an manageable offense, I guess. अरे भाई बस कर. बहुत ही घटिया सस्टेन कर रहा है ये. Green, red, continued, so hard, दो लाल कैंडल्स बनी हैं, ना खास सस्टेन. नहीं करना चाहिए इसे. कोशिश में है डबल टॉप बनाने की, बट नेक ब्रेक नहीं हुआ है अभी तक. 24 ब्रेक करेगा, 22 के बाद तो आराम से बैठ के देखेंगे गोल्ड को क्या करता है हमारा गोल्ड पाजी. Oh, that's too good to hear, Mr. Chaudhary. Option Chaudhary. ले लीजिए एंट्री फिर मिस्टर डेविल आपकी एंट्री के लिए आया है तो. इंतजार ही एक ट्रेडर की निशानी है. इंतजार करो. गोल्ड तो हराम पर उतर आया है. फंडिंग का पे आउट ट्रस्ट वॉलेट में लो, क्रिप्टो कार्ड में ले लो, एटीएम विड्रॉ कर लो, कैश चाहिए, स्पेंडिंग करनी है मर्जी चाहे गत्ता छुआ हो गया काम. You just need to make a tap and pay. Yeah, we are definitely in the channel, hopefully just waiting for the momentum to get hit. इंतजार बड़े ही इंतजार के बाद ट्रेड लिया वेट कर करके फ्रॉम द पास्ट 3 years the price is rotating in this channel only. हटाओ यार, ये बहुत ज़्यादा ही वेट करा रहा है। पंद्रह मिनट पे क्या 15 मिनट है, ओपनिंग है 15 मिनट की, ये कैंडल सही क्लोज कर गई है। 30 मिनट्स का क्या सीन है। 30 मिनट पर 45 मिनट का ओपन हुआ है, तो 10 मिनट्स पर भी ओपन हुआ है। पहले अपर विक लगाई है, तो होपफुली द प्राइस विल गो इन आवर डायरेक्शन ओनली। Guys, the price is 35 pips down right now. We are not taking more losses now. बहुत ज़्यादा वेट हो गया है, तो अपने लॉसेस कम कर लेते हैं। The ones who are in the trade, be aware of this. ठीक है, बस ज़्यादा नहीं लेंगे। This is the most logical one right now. जिनको लग रहा है सेफ कर लेना चाहिए, लेकिन निकल बड़ा बोर कर रहा है। And rest can keep your SL at cost as well. मैंने अपना स्टॉप लॉस यहाँ पर ट्रेन कर लिया है। I will trade for myself too. नोट कर लीजिएगा जो भी स्टॉप लॉस हम लोगों ने ट्रेड किया है, इससे ज़्यादा लॉस लेने का कोई मतलब नहीं बनता है। ट्रेड के अंदर गिरेगा तो ये यहीं से गिर जाएगा, ऊपर में आएगा तो फिर इसके भी ऊपर निकलेगा। ठीक है, गिरेगा तो यहीं से गिर जाएगा। फर्स्ट टीपी पे आएगा तो आपको ऑलमोस्ट 1:2 हो जाएगा। फर्स्ट टीपी आपका 74 का है तो 1:2.5 हो जाएगा अकॉर्डिंग टू द स्टॉप लॉस दैट वी हैव राइट नाउ। जो लोग ऑलरेडी ट्रेड में हैं प्लीज अपना स्टॉप कर लीजिएगा, क्योंकि गिरना होगा तो प्राइस को यहीं से फॉल कर जाएगा, और अगर इसको ऊपर में जाना होगा तो फिर ये इसके भी ऊपर में निकलेगा। हल्का सा बफर करके दो लॉट के साथ मेरा $795 का आ चुका है। 549 मेरे ऑलरेडी चल रहे हैं। रनिंग प्रॉफिट जो है। इंतहा हो गई इंतजार की, आई ना कोई खबर गोली बाजी की। साइडवेज मार्केट में ट्रेड करना भी एक कला है दोस्तों। 25 मिनट और बाकी हैं भैया। देखो सारे के सारे टाइम फ्रेम्स पर माजरा तो सेलिंग का ही दिख रहा है। बट इतना ज़्यादा सड़ गया है कि मन हो रहा है एग्जिट ही मार दूं। One hour 30 minutes। लो तो तोड़ के आई है इस कैंडल का। हाई तोड़ा engulfing बन जाएगी which will not be good। ऊपर से लो हाई मेंटेन है, नीचे से हायर लोस मेंटेन है। जिस भी साइड फटेगा लिक्विडिटी स्वीप करेगा। और जीबीपी यूएसडी जीबीपी में भी न्यूज़ आई थी, दैट इज व्हाई आपको मोमेंटम मिला। इसने सेलिंग करी है अगेंस्ट द डॉलर्स जेपीवाई पेयर्स ने। यूएसडी जेपीवाई में ज़्यादा क्लैरिटी दिख जाएगी। यूएसडी जेपीवाई में भी देखो आप। अभी थोड़ी देर पहले न्यूज़ थी। क्या बोलूं यार, क्या ही बोलूं गोल्ड के लिए। शब्द खत्म हो गए हैं आज मेरे पास। ज़्यादा ही सड़ गया है ना। हटाओ यार, करो एग्जिट। अभी कॉस्ट पे लगा लो सीटीसी कर लो। वापस कॉस्ट पे आएगा तो हटाना इसको, भगाना। ठीक है। एसएल एट कॉस्ट नाउ। भगाओ, दिमाग खराब कर दिया इसने। वापस से टच करेगा तो भगाओ इसको। बंद कर दिया है दिमाग। वॉलेटाइल सेशन में ट्रेड करेंगे। चलो कॉस्ट को देख कर जाऊं। डन गाइस। It was too much boring। फिलहाल अभी वैसे कॉस्ट पर आया तो नहीं है, बट आ जाएगा। कितना ही दूर है। अभी भी बचा है ये। भगवान ही बचाए इस ट्रेड से तो। 11 पे दूर था वैसे। चल किस का गया है ब्रेक इवन। स्प्रेड वालों का तो खा गया होगा। जीरो स्प्रेड वालों का बचा होगा। किस का गया ब्रेक इवन, बताना। आपका होल्ड है। मैंने तो एग्जिट नहीं किया। स्टिल अलाइव। खत्म। $3 का फायदा हुआ। कॉस्ट पे लगा दो ऐसे जाएगा तो ब्रेक इवन जाएगा। तुम्हारा ब्रेक इवन गया, ठीक है। खत्म करते हैं स्ट्रीम को। बहुत ज्यादा वेट करा, कम से कम 1.5 घंटे तक हम लोगों ने प्राइस के लिए वेट करा। 55 प्राइस ने लो लगाया, नथिंग इन हैंड टुडे। सी यू गाइस, बाय बाय।
Judgment, you've got a few tweets further down the line that I would put in the category of continuous learning. There is no skill called business. Avoid business magazines and business class. Study microeconomics, game theory, psychology, persuasion, ethics, mathematics, and computers. There's one other comment that you made in a Periscope that was you should be able to pick up any book in the library and read it. And the last tweet in this category was reading is faster than listening, doing is faster than watching.
Yeah, the most important tweet on this I don't even have in here, unfortunately, which is the foundation of learning is reading. I don't know a smart person who doesn't read and read all the time. And the problem is, what do I read? How do I read? Because for most people, it's a struggle, it's a chore. So the most important thing is just to learn how to educate yourself. And the way to educate yourself is to develop a love for reading. So the tweet that is left out, the one that I was hinting at, is read what you love until you love to read. It's that simple. Everybody I know who reads a lot loves to read. And they love to read because they read books that they loved. It's a little bit of a catch-22, but you want to start off just reading wherever you are and then keep building up from there until reading becomes a habit. And then eventually you will just get bored of the simple stuff. So you may start off reading fiction, then you might graduate to science fiction, then you may graduate to nonfiction, then you may graduate to science or philosophy or mathematics or whatever it is. But take your natural path and just read the things that interest you until you understand them, and then you'll naturally move to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Now, there is an exception to this, which is where I was hinting with what things you actually do want to learn, which is at some point there's too much out there to read. And even reading is full of junk. There are actually things you can read, especially early on, that will program your brain a certain way. And then later things that you read, you will decide whether those things are true or false based on the earlier things. So it is important that you read foundational things. And foundational things, I would say, are the original books in a given field that are very scientific in their nature. So for example, instead of reading a business book, pick up Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. Instead of reading a book on biology or evolution that's written today, I would pick up Darwin's Origin of the Species. Instead of reading a book on biotech right now that may be very advanced, I would just pick up The Eighth Day of Creation by Watson and Crick. Instead of reading advanced books on what cosmology and what Neil deGrasse Tyson and Stephen Hawking have been saying, you can pick up Richard Feynman's 6 Easy Pieces and start with basic physics. If you understand the basics, especially in mathematics and physics and sciences, then you will not be afraid of any book. All of us have that memory of when we're sitting in class and we're learning mathematics, and it was all logical and all made sense until at one point the class moved too fast and we fell behind. And then after that, we were left memorizing equations, memorizing concepts without being able to derive them from first principles. And at that moment, we were lost. Because unless you're a professional mathematician, you're not going to remember those things. All you're going to remember are the techniques, the foundations. So you have to make sure that you're building on a steel frame of understanding, because you're putting together a foundation for a skyscraper. And you're not just memorizing things, because if you're just memorizing things, you're lost. So the foundations are ultra important. And the ultimate is when you walk into a library and you look at it up and down and you don't fear any book. You know that you can take any book off the shelf, you can read it, you can understand it, you can absorb what is true, you can reject what is false, and you have a basis for even working that out that is logical and scientific and not purely just based on opinions. The beauty of the internet is the entire Library of Alexandria times 10 is at your fingertips at all times. It's not the means of education or the means of learning are scarce. The means of learning are abundant. It's the desire to learn that's scarce. So you really have to cultivate that desire. And it's not even cultivated, you have to not lose it. Children have a natural curiosity. If you go to a young child who's first learning language, they're pretty much always asking, what's this? What's that? Why is this? Who's that? They're always asking questions. But one of the problems is that schools and our educational system and even our way of raising children replaces curiosity with compliance. And once you replace the curiosity with the compliance, you get an obedient factory worker, but you no longer get a creative thinker. And you need creativity. You need that ability to feed your own brain to learn whatever you want. And to me, foundational things are principles. They're algorithms. They're deep-seated logical understanding where you can defend it or attack it from any angle. And that's why microeconomics is important, because macroeconomics, a lot of memorization, a lot of macro bullshit. As Nassim Taleb says, it is easier to macro bullshit than it is to micro bullshit, because macroeconomics is voodoo complex science meets politics. You can't find two macroeconomists to agree on anything these days, and different macroeconomists get used by different politicians to peddle their different pet theories. There are even macroeconomists out there now peddling something called modern monetary theory, which says, hey, except for this pesky thing called inflation, we can just print all the money that we want. Yes, except for this pesky thing called inflation. That's like saying, instead of limited energy, we can fire rockets off into space all day long. It's just nonsense. But the fact that there are people who have macroeconomists in their title and are peddling modern monetary theory just tells you that macroeconomics as a so-called science has been corrupted. It's a branch of politics. So you really want to focus on the foundations. The ultimate foundation are mathematics and logic. If you understand logic and mathematics, then you have the basis for understanding the scientific method. Once you understand the scientific method, then you can understand how to separate truth from falsehood in other fields and other things that you're reading. So be very careful about reading other people's opinions, and even be careful about reading facts, because so-called facts are often just opinions, but with a veneer around them. What you really are looking for is algorithms. What you're really looking for is understanding. It's better to go through a book really slowly and struggle and stumble and rewind than it is to fly through it quickly and say, well, now I've read 20 books, I've read 30 books, I've read 50 books in the field. It's like Bruce Lee said, I don't fear the man who knows 1,000 kicks and 1,000 punches. I fear the man who's practiced one punch 10,000 times or one kick 10,000 times. It's the understanding that comes through repetition and through usage and through logic and foundations that really makes you a smart thinker.
To lay a foundation for learning for the rest of your life, I think you need two things if I was going to try and sum it up. One, practical persuasion. And two, you need to go deep in some technical category, whether it's abstract math or you want to read Donald Knuth's books on algorithms, or you want to read Feynman's lectures on physics. If you have practical persuasion and a deep understanding of some complex topic, I think you'll have a great foundation for learning for the rest of your life.
Yeah, if I could expand that a little bit, I would say that the 5 most important skills are, of course, reading, writing, arithmetic, and then as you're adding in persuasion, which is talking, and then finally I would add computer programming, just because it's an applied form of arithmetic that just gets you so much leverage for free in any domain that you operate in. If you're good with computers, if you're good at basic mathematics, if you're good at writing, if you're good at speaking, and if you like reading, you're set for life. So in that sense, business to me is bottom of the barrel. There's no actual skill called business. It's too generic of a thing. It's like a skill called relating, like relating to humans. That's not a skill. It's too broad. So a lot of what goes on in business schools, and there's some very intelligent stuff taught in business schools. I don't mean to detract from them completely, but some of the stuff that's taught in business school is essentially just anecdotes. They call it case studies, but it's just anecdotes. And they're trying to help you pattern match by throwing lots of data points at you. But the reality is you'll never understand them fully until you're actually in that position yourself. Even then, you will find that basic concepts from game theory and psychology and ethics and mathematics and computers and logic will serve you much, much better. So I would focus on the foundations. I would focus with a science bent. I would develop a love for reading, including by reading so-called junk food that you're not supposed to read. You don't have to read the classics. That is the foundation for your self-education.
What did you mean when you said that doing is faster than watching?
When it comes to your learning curve, if you want to optimize your learning curve, one of the reasons why I don't love podcasts, even though I'm a generator of podcasts, is that I like to consume my information very quickly. And now I'm a good reader, a fast reader, and I can read very fast, but I can only listen at a certain speed. I know people listen to 2x, 3x, but everyone sounds like a chipmunk. And it's hard to go back, it's hard to highlight, it's hard to pinpoint snippets and save them in your notebook and so on. Similarly, A lot of people think they can become really skilled at something by watching others do it, or even by reading about others doing it. And going back to business school case studies, that's a classic example. They study other people's businesses, but in reality, you're going to learn a lot more about running a business by operating your own lemonade stand or equivalent, or even opening a little retail store down the street. That is how you're going to learn on the job, because a lot of the subtleties don't express themselves until you're actually running the business. For example, everyone's now into mental models these days, right? You go to Farnham Street, you go to Poor Charlie's Almanac, and you can learn all the different mental models. But which ones matter more? Which ones do you apply more often? Which ones matter in which circumstances? That's actually the hard part. For example, my personal learning has been that the principal agent problem drives so much in this world. It's an incentives problem. I've learned that tit for tat, iterated prisoner's dilemma, is the piece of game theory that is worth knowing the most. You can literally almost put down the game theory book after that. By the way, the best way to learn game theory is to play lots of games. I never even read game theory books. I consider myself extremely good at game theory. I've never opened up a game theory book and found a result in there where I was like, oh yeah, that's common sense to me. Because the reason is I just grew up playing all kinds of games, and I ran into all kinds of corner cases with all kinds of friends. And so it's just second nature to me. So you can always learn better by doing on the job. But the doing is a subtle thing. That word doing encapsulates a lot. So for example, let's say I want to learn how to run a business. Well, if I start a business where I go in every day and I'm doing the same thing, let's say I'm running the retail store down the street where I'm stocking the shelves with food and liquor every single day, I'm not going to learn that much because I'm repeating things a lot. So I'm putting in thousands of hours, but there are thousands of hours doing the same thing. Whereas if I was putting in thousands of iterations, that would be different. So the learning curve is across iterations. So if I was trying new marketing experiments in the store all the time, I was constantly changing out the inventory, I was constantly changing out the branding and the messaging, I was constantly changing the sign, I was constantly changing the online channels that I was using to drive foot traffic in, I was experimenting with being open at different hours. If I even had the ability to walk around and talk to other store owners and get in their books and figure out how they're running their business, it's the number of iterations that drives a learning curve. So the more iterations you can have, the more shots on goal you can have, the faster you're going to learn. It's not just about the hours put in. It's actually a combination of the two, but I think just the way we're built and the way that the world presents itself, the world offers us very easily the opportunity to do the same thing over and over and over again. But really, we'd be better served if we went off and found ways to do new things from scratch. And doing something new the first time is painful because you're wandering into uncertain territory, and high odds are that you will fail. So you just have to get very, very comfortable with frequent small failures. Nassim Taleb talks about this also. He made his fortune, his wealth, by being a trader who relied upon black swans. Nassim Taleb made money by essentially losing little bits of money every day. And then once in a blue moon, he would make a lot of money when the unthinkable happened for other people. Whereas most people want to make little bits of money every day, and in exchange, they'll tolerate lots of blow-up risk. They'll tolerate going completely bankrupt. We're not evolved to bleed a little bit every day. If you're out in the natural environment and you get a cut and you're literally bleeding a little bit every day, you will eventually die. You have to stop that cut. We're evolved for small victories all the time, but that becomes very expensive. That's where the crowd is. That's where the herd is. So if you're willing to bleed a little bit every day, but in exchange you'll win big later, you'll do better. That is, by the way, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs bleed every day. They're not making money. They're losing money. They're constantly stressed out. All the responsibility is upon them, but when they win big. On average, they'll make more.
So why don't we jump into accountability, which I thought was pretty interesting, and I think you have your own unique take on it. So the first tweet on accountability was, embrace accountability and take business risks under your own name. Society will reward you with responsibility, equity, and leverage.
Yeah, so to get rich, you're going to need leverage, and leverage comes in labor, comes in capital, or it can come through code or media. But most of these, like labor and capital, people have to give to you. For labor, somebody has to follow you. For capital, somebody has to give you money or assets to manage or machines. So to get these things, you have to build up credibility, and you have to do those under your own name as much as possible, which is risky. So accountability is a double-edged thing. It allows you to take credit when things go well and to bear the brunt of the failure when things go badly. So in that sense, people who are stamping their names on things aren't foolish, they're just confident. Maybe it turns out to be foolish in the end, but if you look at a Kanye or an Oprah or a Trump or an Elon or anyone like that, these people can get rich just off their name because their name is such powerful branding. Regardless of what you think of Trump, you have to realize that the guy was among the best in the world at just branding his name. Why would you go to Trump Casino? It used to be because Trump. Why would you go to Trump Tower? Because of Trump. When it came time to vote, I think there were a lot of voters who just went in and said Trump. They recognized the name. So the name recognition paid off. Same thing with Oprah. She puts her brand on something, her name on something, and it flies off the shelves, and it's like instant validator. But these people also take risks for putting their name out there. Obviously, Trump is now probably hated by half or more than half of the country and by a big chunk of the world because he sticks his name out there. By putting your name out there, you become a celebrity, and fame has many, many downsides. It's better to be anonymous and rich than to be poor and famous, but even famous and rich has a lot of downsides associated with it. You're always in the public eye. So accountability is quite important. When you're working to build a product, or you're working in a team, or you're working in a business, we are constantly drummed into our heads how important it is to be part of a team. And absolutely agree with that. A lot of our training socially is telling us to not stick our necks out of the crowd. There's a saying that I hear from Australian friends that like the tall poppy gets cut, right? Don't stick your neck out. But I would say that actually a really, really well-functioning team is small and has clear accountability for each of the different portions. So you can say, okay, this person is responsible for building the product. This person is responsible for the messaging. This person is responsible for raising money. This person is responsible for the pricing strategy and maybe the online advertising. So if somebody screws up, you know exactly who's responsible, while at the same time something goes really well, you also know exactly who's responsible. So if you have a small team and you have clearly delineated responsibilities, then you can still keep a very high level of accountability. And accountability is really important because when something succeeds or fails, if it fails, everybody points fingers at each other. And if it succeeds, everybody steps forward to take credit. And we've all had that experience when we were in school and we got like a group assignment to do, and there were people in there, there were probably a few people in there who did a lot of the work, and then there were a few people who just did a lot of grandstanding or positioning to do the work. So we're all familiar with this from a childhood sense, but it is uncomfortable to talk about. But clear accountability is important. Without accountability, you don't have incentives. Without accountability, you can't build credibility, but you take risk. So you take risk of failure, you take risk of humiliation, you take risk of failure under your own name, which, luckily in modern society, there's no more debtor's prison and people don't go to jail or get executed for losing other people's money. But we're still socially hardwired to not fail in public under our own names. And the people who have the ability to fail in public under their own names actually gain a lot of power. For example, I'll give a personal anecdote. Up until about 2013, 2014, my public persona was entirely around startups and investing. And only around 2014, 2015 did I start talking about philosophy and psychological things and broader things. And it made me a little nervous because I was doing it under my own name. And there were definitely people in the industry who sent me messages through the back channel like, what are you doing? You're ending your career. This is stupid. And I just went with it. I took a risk. Same with crypto early on. I took a risk. But when you put your name out there, you take a risk with certain things, you also get to reap the rewards. You get the benefits. Accountability is important because that's how you're going to get leverage. That's how you're going to get credibility. It's also how you're going to get equity. You're going to get a piece of the business. When you're negotiating with other people, ultimately, if someone else is making a decision about how to compensate you, that decision will be based on how replaceable you are. And if you have high accountability, that makes you less replaceable, and then they have to give you equity, which is a piece of the upside. But equity itself is a good example because equity is also a risk-based instrument. Equity means you get paid everything after all the people who need guaranteed money are paid back. So if you look at the hierarchy of capital in a company, the employees get paid first. They get to pay the salary first. Like in the legal proceedings, the salaries are sacrosanct. If you are a board member and the company spends too much money and has back salaries to pay, the government will go after you personally to pay back the salaries. So the employees get the most security, but in exchange for that security, they don't have as much upside. Then next in line would be the debt holders, who are maybe the bankers who lent money to the company for operations, and they need to make their fixed coupon every month or every year, but they don't get much more upside beyond that. Now, they might be making 5, 10, 15, 20, 25% a year, but that's where their upside is limited to. And then finally are the equity holders. And these people are actually going to get most of the upside. So once the debt holders are paid off and the salaries are paid off, whatever remains goes to them. But if there isn't enough money to pay off the salaries and the debt holders, or if there's just enough to pay off the salary and the debt holders, which is what happens with most businesses most of the times, the equity holders get nothing. So the equity holders take on greater risk, but then they take on, in exchange, they get nearly unlimited upside. And you can do the same with all of your work. So essentially, taking accountability for your actions is the same as taking an equity position in all of your work. You're essentially taking greater downside risk and greater upside risk. But realize that in modern society, the downside risk is not that large. Even personal bankruptcy can wipe the debts clean. In good ecosystems, I'm most familiar with Silicon Valley, but generally people will forgive failures as long as you were honest and made a high integrity effort. So there's not really that much to fear in terms of failure. And so people should be taking on a lot more accountability than they actually are.
Is accountability actually fragile, or do you really just mean that we're hardwired not to fail in public, so it just feels like it's a fragile thing?
I think it could actually be fragile. Like, example of accountability is you're an airplane pilot. As a captain, you're taking on accountability for the entire plane. Let's say that something goes wrong with the aircraft, you can't later blame it on anyone else. You can't blame it on the steward or the stewardess. You can't blame it on the co-pilot. You're the captain. You're responsible for the ship. And if you screw up, you crash the ship and there are immediate consequences. In the old days, the captain was expected to go down with the ship. If the ship was sinking, literally the last person who got to get off was the captain. So yeah, I think accountability does come with real risks, but we're talking about in a business context. So the risk here would be that you would probably be the last one to get your capital back out. You'd be the last one to get paid for your time. So, the time that you put in, the capital that you put into the company, these are what are at risk. Even if a business fails and your name's on it, that's not as bad as if it turns out to be an integrity issue. Like your Bernie Madoff, for example, Madoff Investments. That name is never going to be good again in the investment community. You could be Bernie Madoff's great-great-great-grandson. You are not going to go into the investment business because you ruined the family name. So I think these days, the accountability risk with the name happens more around integrity rather than it does around purely economic failure.
The big takeaway for me on accountability is that you will be rewarded directly in proportion with your accountability. I also think this is why people like Taleb rail against CEOs who get rewards without accountability.
Yeah, Taleb's Skin in the Game is required reading if you want to get anywhere in modern life and understand how modern systems work. Then Skin in the Game would be near top of my list to read. But yes, accountability, skin in the game, these concepts go very closely hand in hand. I think of accountability as reputational skin in the game. It's putting your personal reputation on the line as skin in the game. Accountability is a simple concept. The only part of accountability that may be a little counterintuitive is that we're currently socially brainwashed to not take on accountability, not in a visible way. But I think there are ways to take on accountability where every member of a team can take on accountability for their portion. And that is how you get a well-functioning team while still putting credits and losses in the correct columns.
So why don't we talk a little bit about leverage? The first tweet in the storm was a famous quote from Archimedes, which was, "Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth." The next tweet was, "Fortunes require leverage. Business leverage comes from capital, people, and products with no marginal cost of replication."
Leverage is critical. The reason I stuck an Archimedes quote in there is normally I don't like putting other people's quotes in my Twitter. Like, that doesn't add any value. You can go look up those people's quotes. But this quote I had to put in there because it's just so fundamental. I read it when I was very, very young, and it had a huge impression on me. And we all know what leverage is when we use a seesaw or a lever. We understand how that works physically. But I think what our brains aren't really well evolved to comprehend is how much leverage is possible in modern society and what the newest forms of leverage are. And so the oldest form of leverage is labor, which is people working for you. So instead of me lifting rocks, I can have 10 people lift rocks. Then just by my guidance on where the rocks should go, a lot lot more rocks get moved than I could do myself. Everybody understands this because we're evolved to understand the labor form of leverage. And so what happens is society overvalues labor as a form of leverage. This is why your parents are impressed when you get a promotion and you have lots of people working underneath you. This is why when a lot of naive people, when you tell them about your company, they'll say how many people work there. They'll use that as a way to establish credibility. They're trying to measure how much leverage and impact you actually have. Or when someone starts a movement, they'll say how many people they have or how big the army is. We just automatically assume that more people is better. But I would argue that this is the worst form of leverage that you could possibly use. Managing other people is incredibly messy. It requires tremendous leadership skills. You're one short hop from a mutiny or getting eaten or torn apart by the mob. It's incredibly competed over. Entire civilizations have been destroyed over this fight. For example, communism, Marxism is all about the battle between capital and labor, das Kapital and das Labor, right? So it's a trap. So you really want to stay out of labor-based leverage. You want the minimum amount of people working with you that are going to allow you to use the other forms of leverage, which I would argue are much more interesting. The second type of leverage is capital. And this one's a little less hardwired into us because large amounts of money moving around and being saved and being invested in money markets, these are inventions of human beings that last few hundred to few thousand years. They're not evolved with us from hundreds of thousands of years. So we understand them a little bit less well. They probably require more intelligence to use correctly, and the ways in which we use them keep changing. Management skills from 100 years ago might still apply today, but investing in the stock market skills from 100 years ago probably don't apply to the same level today. So capital is a trickier form of leverage to use. It's more modern. It's the one that people have used to get fabulously wealthy in the last century. It's probably been the dominant form of leverage in the last century. And you can see this by who are the richest people. It's bankers, politicians in corrupt countries who print money, essentially people who move large amounts of money around. And if you look at the top of very large companies, outside of technology companies, in many, many large old companies, the CEO job is really a financial job. They're really financial asset managers. Now, sometimes an asset manager can put a pleasant face on it, so you get a Warren Buffett type. But deep down, I think we all dislike capital as a form of leverage because it feels unfair, because it's this invisible thing that can be accumulated and passed sharing in it. That said, capital is a powerful form of leverage. It can be converted to labor. It can be converted to other things. It's very surgical, very analytical. If you are a brilliant investor and you have $1 billion and you can make a 30% return with it, whereas anybody else can only make a 20% return, you're going to get all the money and you're going to get paid very handsomely for it. It scales very, very well. If you get good at managing capital, you can manage more and more capital much more easily than you can manage more and more people. So it is a good form of leverage, but the hard part with capital is how do you obtain it? And that's why I talked about specific knowledge and accountability first. If you have specific knowledge in a domain, and if you're accountable and you have a good name in that domain, then people are going to give you capital as a form of leverage that you can use to then go get more capital. So, but capital also is fairly well understood, and I think a lot of the knocks against capitalism come because of the accumulation of capital. The most interesting and the most important form of leverage is this idea of products that have no marginal cost of replication. This is a new form of leverage. This was only invented in the last few hundred years. It got started with the printing press. It accelerated broadcast media, and now it's really blown up with the internet and with code. So now you can multiply your efforts without having to involve other humans and without needing money from other humans. This podcast is a form of leverage. Long ago, I would have had to sit in a lecture hall and lecture each of you personally, and I would have maybe reached a few hundred people, and that would have been that. 30 years ago, I would have to be lucky to get on TV, which is somebody else's leverage. They would have distorted the message. They would have taken the economics out of it or charged me for it. They would have muddled the message, and I would have been lucky to get that form of leverage. But today, thanks to the internet, I can buy a cheap microphone, hook it up to a laptop or an iPad, and there you are, all listening. So this newest form of leverage is where all the new fortunes are made. So all the new billionaires. So the last generation fortunes were made by capital. That was the Warren Buffetts of the world. But the new generation fortunes are all made through code or media. Joe Rogan making 50 to 100 million bucks a year from his podcast. PewDiePie, I don't know how much money he's rolling in, but he's bigger than the news, right? The Fortnite players. Of course, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Larry Page and Sergey Brin and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. That is all code-based leverage. Now, the beauty is when you combine all of these three. That's where tech startups really excel, where you take just the minimum, but highest output labor that you can get, which are engineers and designers, product developers. And then you add in capital, you use that for marketing, advertising, scaling, and you add in lots of code and media and podcasts and content to get it all out there. That is a magic combination. And that's why you see technology startups explode out of nowhere, use massive leverage, and just make huge outsized returns.
Do you want to talk a little bit about permissioned versus permissionless?
Probably the most interesting thing to keep in mind about the new forms of leverage is they are permissionless. They don't require somebody else's permission for you to use them or succeed. For labor leverage, somebody has to decide to follow you. For capital leverage, somebody has to give you money to invest or to turn into a product. But coding, writing books, recording podcasts, tweeting, YouTubing, these kinds of things, these are permissionless. You don't need anyone's permission to do them. And that's why they're very egalitarian. They're great equalizers of leverage. And as much as people may rail on Facebook and YouTube, they're not going to stop using it because this permissionless leverage where everyone can be a broadcaster is just too good. The same way, you can rail upon Apple for having a slightly closed ecosystem in the iPhone, but everyone's writing apps for it. So as long as you can write apps for it, you can get rich or reach users doing that, why not? I think of all the forms of leverage, the best one in modern society, and people are going to, this is glib, this is a little overused, and this is why I tell people learn to code, right? It's that we have this idea that in the future, there's going to be these robots, and they're going to be doing everything. And that may be true, but I would say the majority of the robot revolution has already happened. The robots are already here, and there are way more robots than there are humans. It's just that we pack them in data centers for heat and efficiency reasons. We put them in servers inside the computers, all the circuits, the robot mind inside that's doing all the work. And so every great software developer, for example, now has an army of robots working for him at nighttime while he or she sleeps after they've written the code, and it's just cranking away. So the robots army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. We're about halfway through it. We're just adding in much more of the hardware component these days. As we get more familiar, we get more comfortable with the idea of autonomous vehicles and autonomous airplanes and autonomous ships, and maybe autonomous trucks and their delivery bots and Boston Dynamics robots and all that. But robots who are doing web searching for you, for example, are already here. The ones who are like cleaning up your video and audio and transmitting it around the world are already here. The ones who are answering many customer service queries, things that you would have had to call a human for, are already here. So an army of robots is already here. It's very cheaply available. And the bottleneck is just figuring out intelligent and interesting things to do to them. And essentially, you can order this army of robots around. Just the commands have to be issued in a computer language, in a language that they understand. So these robots aren't very smart. They have to be told very precisely what to do and how to do it. So coding is such a great superpower because now you can speak the language of the robot armies and you can tell them what to do.
And I think at this point, actually, people are not only commanding the army of robots within servers through code, they're actually manipulating the movement of trucks, of other people. Just ordering a package on Amazon, you're manipulating the movement of many people and many robots to get a package delivered to you. People are doing the same things to build businesses now. So there's the army of robots within servers, and then there's also an army of actual robots and people that are being manipulated through software.
Labor and capital are much less egalitarian, not just in their inputs, but in their outputs. Let's say that I need something that humans have to provide, like if I want a massage, or if I need someone to cook my food. The more of a human element there is in providing that service, the less egalitarian it is. Jeff Bezos probably has much better vacations than most of us, right? Because he has lots of humans running around doing whatever he needs to do. But if you look at the output of code and media, Jeff Bezos doesn't get to watch better movies and TV than we do. Jeff Bezos doesn't get to even have a better computing experience. Like Google doesn't give him some premium special Google account where his searches are better. It's the nature of code and media output that the same product is accessible to everybody. And it turns into a positive sum game, where if Jeff Bezos is consuming the same product as 1,000 other people, that product's to be better than the version that Jeff would consume on his own. Whereas with other products, that's not true. If you look at something like buying a Rolex, which is no longer about telling the time, it's a signaling good. It's all about showing off, I have a Rolex. That's a zero-sum game. If everybody in the world is wearing a Rolex, then people don't want to wear Rolexes anymore because they no longer signal. It's canceled out the effect. And so rich people do have an advantage in consuming that product. They just price it up till only they can have Rolexes, and then poor people can't have Rolexes, and Rolexes resume their signaling value. But something like watching Netflix or using Google or using Facebook or YouTube, or even, frankly, modern day cars. Like, rich people don't have better cars, they just have weirder cars. You can't drive a Lamborghini on the street at any speed that makes sense for a Lamborghini, so it's actually a worse car on the street. It just turned into a signaling good at that point. Your sweet spot where you want to be is somewhere like a Tesla Model 3 or like a Toyota Corolla. It's an amazing car. A new Toyota Corolla is a really nice car, but because it's mainstream, the technology has amortized the cost of production over the largest number of consumers possible, and the best products tend to be at the center, at the sweet spot, the middle class, rather than being targeted at the upper class. So I think one of the things that we don't necessarily appreciate in modern society is as the forms of leverage have gone from being human-based, labor-based, and being capital-based to being more product and code and media-based, that most of the goods and services that we consume are becoming much more egalitarian in their consumption. Even food is becoming that way. Like, food is becoming cheap and abundant, at least in the first world, too much so to our detriment. Jeff Bezos isn't necessarily eating better food, he's just eating different food. Or he's eating like food that's prepared and served theatrically. So it's almost like more of, again, that human element performance. But the labor element out of food production has gone down massively. The capital element has gone down massively. And so even food production itself has become more technology oriented. And so the gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting smaller. So if you care about ethics in wealth creation, it is better to create your wealth using code and media as leverage, because then those products are equally available to everybody, as opposed to trying to create your wealth through labor or capital, because what I'm referring to here is scale economies. Technology products and media products have such amazing scale economies that you always want to use the product that is used by the most people. The one that's used by the most people ends up having the largest budget. There's no marginal cost of adding another user, and so with the largest budget, you get the highest quality. So the best TV shows are actually not going to be some obscure ones just made for a few rich people. They're going to be the big budget ones like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or Bird Box, where they have massive budgets. They can just use those budgets to get to a certain quality level. And then rich people, to be different, they have to fly to Sundance and watch a documentary, because you and I aren't going to fly to Sundance because, that's something that bored rich people do to show off, and we're not going to watch a documentary because most of them just aren't actually even that good, right? Again, if you're wealthy today, for large classes of things, you spend your money on signaling goods to show other people that you're wealthy, and you try and convert them to status, as opposed to actually consuming the goods for their own sake.
People and capital as a form of leverage have a negative externality, and code and product have a positive externality attached to them.
Ave Maria, cheia de graça, o Senhor é convosco, bendita sois vós entre as mulheres.
Capital and labor are also starting to become a little more permissionless, or at least the permissioning is diffuse because of the internet. So instead of labor, we have community now, which is a diffused form of labor. For example, Mark Zuckerberg has 1 billion people doing work for him by using Facebook. And instead of going to raise capital from someone who's rich, now we have crowdfunding. So you can raise millions and millions of dollars for a charity, for a health problem, or for a business. You can do it all online. So capital and labor are also becoming permissionless, and you don't need to necessarily do it the old-fashioned way, where you have to go around and ask people for permission to use their money or their time. One more question about leverage. Do you think a choice of business model or a choice of product can also bring a kind of leverage to it? For example, pursuing a business that has network effects, pursuing a business that has brand effects, or other choices of business model that people could manipulate that just give you free leverage.
Yeah, there's some really good microeconomic concepts that are important to understand. One of those is scale economies, which is the more you produce of something, the cheaper it gets to make it. That's something that a lot of businesses have, basic economics 101, and you should try and get into a business where making widget number 12 is cheaper than making widget number 5, and making widget number 10,000 is a lot cheaper than the previous ones. And this builds up an automatic sort of barrier to entry against competition and getting commoditized. So that's an important one. Another one, this is along the same lines, but technology products especially and media products have this great quality where they have zero marginal cost of reproduction. So creating another copy of what you just created is free. So when somebody listens to this podcast or watches a YouTube video about this, it doesn't cost me anything for the next person who shows up. Those zero marginal cost things, they take a while to get going because you make very little money per user, but over time they can really, really add up. So Joe Rogan is working no harder on his current podcast than he was on podcast number 1. But on podcast number 1100, he's making $1 million for the podcast, whereas for the previous one, he probably lost for the first one. So that's an example of zero marginal cost. And then the most subtle but the most important is this idea of network effects. And it comes from computer networking. Bob Metcalfe, who created Ethernet, famously coined Metcalfe's law, which is the value of a network is proportional to the square of the number of nodes in the network. So if a network of size 10 would have a value of 100, a network of a size 100 would have a value of 10,000. It's not just 10x more, it's 100x more because it's a square. So the difference is a square. So you want to be in a network effects business, assuming you're not number 2. If you're number 1 in the network effects business, you win everything. So example, if you look at Facebook, right, your friends and family social networking protocol, who's their competitor? Nobody, because they won everything through network effects. Which is why when people say, well, I can just switch away from Facebook, they don't realize that network effects create natural monopolies. They're very, very powerful things. And one of the dirty secrets of Silicon Valley is that a lot of the winning businesses are natural monopolies. Even ride sharing tends towards one winner-take-all system. Like Uber will always have better economics than Lyft, as long as it's moving more drivers and more riders around. Something like Google, there's only one viable search engine. I do like DuckDuckGo, privacy reasons, but they're just always going to be behind because of network effects. Twitter, right? Where else would you go for microblogging? Even YouTube has weak network effects, but they're still powerful enough. There's really no number 2 site that you go to consume your video on a regular basis. It even turns out in e-tail, Amazon, Prime, and convenience, stored credit cards and information creates a powerful network effect. So what is a network effect? Let's define it precisely. A network effect is when each additional user adds value to the existing user base. So your users themselves are creating some value for the existing users. The classic example that I think everybody can understand is language. Let's say that there's 100 people who live in the community and speak 10 different languages, and each person just speaks one of those 10. Well, you're having to translate all the time. It's incredibly painful. But if all 100 of you spoke the same language, it would add tremendous value. And so the way that community will play out is 10 people start out speaking 10 languages. So let's say that one extra person learns English. Well, now all of a sudden, 11 people know English. So the next person comes in to learn a new language, probably going to choose English. And at some point, let's say English gets to 20 or 25 people, it's done. It's just going to own the entire language marketplace, and the rest of the languages will get competed out, which is why long term, the entire world is probably going to end up speaking English and Chinese. China is closed off on the internet, but the internet itself is a great leveler, and people who want to communicate on the internet are forced to speak English because the largest community of people on the internet speaks English. I always feel bad for my colleagues who grew up speaking foreign languages in foreign countries because you don't have access to so many books. So many books just haven't been translated into other languages. So if you only spoke French or you only spoke German or you only spoke Hindi, for example, you would be at a severe disadvantage in a technical education. Invariably, if you go and get a technical education, you have to learn English just because you have to read these books that have this data that has not been translated. So languages are probably the oldest example of network effect. Money is another example. We should all probably be using the same money, except for the fact that geographic and regulatory boundaries have created these artificial islands of money. But even then, the world tends to use a single currency as the reserve currency at most times, currently the US dollar. So network effects are a very powerful concept. When you're picking a business model, it's really good idea to pick a model where you can benefit from network effects, low marginal costs, and scale economies. And these tend to go together. Like anything that has zero marginal cost of production obviously have scale economies, and things that have zero marginal cost of reproduction very often tend to have network effects because it doesn't cost you anything more to stamp out the thing, so then you can just create little hooks for users to add value to each other. So you should always be thinking about how your users, your customers, can add value to each other, because that is the ultimate form of leverage. You're on the beach in the Bahamas, or you're sleeping at night, and your customers are adding value to each other. The tweet storm is very abstract. It's deliberately meant to be broadly applicable to all kinds of different domains and disciplines and time periods and places. But sometimes it's hard to work without a concrete example. So let's just go concrete for a minute. Look at the real estate business. You could start at the bottom. Let's say you're a day laborer. You come in, you fix people's houses. Someone orders you around, tells you break that piece of rock, stand that piece of wood, put that thing over there. There's just all these menial jobs that go on the construction site. If you're working one of those jobs, unless you're a skilled trade, like say a carpenter or electrician, you don't really have specific knowledge. And even carpenter or electrician is not that specific because other people can be trained how to do it, so you can be replaced. So you get paid your 15, 20, 25, 50. If you're really lucky, $75 an hour, but that's about it. You don't have any leverage other than from the tools that you're using. So if you're driving a bulldozer, that's better than doing it with your hands. So day labor in India makes a lot less because they have no tool leverage. You don't have much accountability. You're a faceless cog in the construction crew, and the owner of the house or the buyer of the house doesn't know or care that you worked on it. One step up from that, you might have a contractor, like a general contractor, who someone hires to come and fix and repair and build up their house. That general contractor is taking accountability, they're taking responsibility. So now, if let's say they got paid $250,000 for the job. Sorry, I'm using Bay Area prices. So maybe I'll go rest of the world prices. $100,000 for the job to fix up a house, and it actually costs the general contractor all said and done $70,000. Well, that contractor is going to pocket that remaining 30. So they got the upside, they got the equity, but they're also taking accountability and risk. So if the project runs over and there's losses, then they eat the losses. But you see, just the accountability gives them some form of additional potential income. And then they also have labor leverage because they have a bunch of people working for them. But it probably tops out right there. You can go one level above that and you can look at a property developer. This might be someone who is a contractor who did a bunch of houses, did a really good job, then decided to go into business for themselves, and they go around looking for beaten down properties that have potential. They buy them, they either raise money from investors, they're funded themselves, they fix the place up, and then they sell it for twice what they bought it for. Maybe they only put in 20% more, so it's a healthy profit. So now a developer like that takes on more accountability, has more risk, they have more specific knowledge, because now you have to know which neighborhoods are worth buying in, which lots are actually good and or which lots are bad, what makes or breaks a specific property. You have to imagine the finished house that's going to be there even when the property itself might look really bad right now. So there's more specific knowledge, there's more accountability and risk, and now you also have capital leverage because you're also putting money into the project. But conceivably, you could buy, a piece of land or a broken down house for $200,000 and turn it into $1 million mansion and pocket all the difference. One level beyond that might be a famous architect or a developer, where just having your name on a property because you've done so many great properties increases its value. One level up from that, you might be a person who decides, well, I understand real estate and I now know enough of the dynamics of real estate that rather than just build and flip my own properties or improve my own properties, I'm going to be a massive developer. I'm going to build entire communities. Another person might say, I like that leverage, but I don't want to manage all these people. I want to do it more through capital. So I'm going to start a real estate investment trust. And that requires specific knowledge, not just about investing in real estate and building real estate, but also requires specific knowledge about the financial markets, the capital markets, and how real estate trusts operate. One level beyond that might be somebody who says, actually, I want to bring the maximum leverage to bear in this market and the maximum specific knowledge. And so that person would say, well, I understand real estate. And I understand everything from basic housing construction to building properties and selling them to how real estate markets move and thrive. And I also understand the technology business. So I understand how to recruit developers, how to write code, and how to build good product. And I understand how to raise money from venture capitalists and how to return it and all of that works. And obviously not a single person may know this. You may pull a team together to do it where each have different skill sets. But that combined entity would have specific knowledge in technology and in real estate. It would have massive accountability because that company's name would be a very high risk, high reward effort attached to the whole thing, and people would devote their lives to it, take on significant risk, and then it would have leverage in code with lots of developers. It would have capital with investors putting money in and the founders' own capital, and it would have labor of some of the highest quality labor that you can find, which is high quality engineers and designers and marketers who are working on the company. And then you may end up with a Trulia or a Redfin or a Zillow kind of company, and then the upside could potentially be in the billions of dollars or the hundreds of millions of dollars. So as you layer in more and more kinds of knowledge that can only be gained on the job and aren't common knowledge, and you layer in more and more accountability and risk taking, and you layer in more and more great people working on it, and more capital on it, and more code and media on it, you keep expanding the scope of the opportunity all the way from the day laborer who might just literally be scrapping on the ground with their hands, all the way up to somebody who started a real estate tech company and then took it public.
We spoke about specific knowledge, we talked about accountability, we talked about leverage. The last skill that Naval talks about in his tweet storm is judgment, where he says that leverage is a force multiplier for your judgment.
We are now living in an age of nearly infinite leverage, and all the great fortunes are created through leverage. So your first job is to go and obtain leverage, and you can obtain leverage through permission by taking risks and getting people to work for you, or by raising capital, or you can get leverage permissionlessly by learning how to code or becoming a good communicator and podcasting, broadcasting, creating videos, writing, etc. So that's how you get leverage. But once you have leverage, what do you do with it? Well, the first part of your career is spent hustling to get leverage. Once you have the leverage, then you want to slow down a bit because your judgment really matters. It's like you've gone from steering your sailboat around to now you're steering an ocean liner or a tanker. You have a lot more at risk, but you have a lot more to gain as well. You're carrying a much higher payload. So in an age of infinite leverage, judgment becomes the most important skill. Warren Buffett is so wealthy now because of his judgment. Even if you were to take away all of Warren's money, tomorrow investors would come out of the woodwork and hand him $100 billion because they know his judgment is so good, and they would give him a big chunk of that $100 billion to invest. So ultimately, everything else that you do is actually setting you up to apply your judgment. One of the big things that people rail on is CEO pay, and for sure there's crony capitalism that goes on where these CEOs control their boards and the boards give them too much money. But there are certain CEOs who definitely earn their keep because their judgment is better. If you're steering a big ship, if you're steering Google or Apple, and your judgment is 10 or 20% better than the next person, society will literally pay you hundreds of millions of dollars more because you're steering $100 billion ship. If you're on course 10 or 20% of the time more often than the other person, the compounding results on that hundreds of billions of dollars you're managing will be so large that your CEO pay will be dwarfed in comparison. So demonstrated judgment, credibility around the judgment is so critical. Warren Buffett wins here because he has massive credibility. He's been highly accountable. He's been right over and over in the public domain. He's built a reputation for very high integrity, so you can trust him. So a person like that, people will throw infinite leverage behind him because of his judgment. Nobody asks him how hard he works. Nobody asks him when he wakes up or when he goes to sleep. It's like, Warren, just do your thing. So especially demonstrated judgment with high accountability, clear track record is critical.
Let's define judgment. I would define it as knowing the long-term effects of your decisions, or being able to predict the long-term effects of your decisions.
It's funny, my definition of wisdom is knowing the long-term consequences of your actions. So they're not all that different. Wisdom is just judgment on a personal domain. Wisdom applied to external problems, I think, is judgment. So they're highly linked. But yes, it's knowing the long-term consequences of your actions and then making kind of the right decision to capitalize on that. Judgment is very hard to build up. This is where both intellect and experience come in play. There are many problems with the so-called intellectuals in the ivory tower, but one of the reasons why Nassim Taleb rails against them is because they have no skin in the game, they have no real-world experience, right? So they just apply purely intellect. And intellect without any experience is often worse than useless, because you get the confidence that the intellect gives you, and you get some of the credibility, but because you had no skin in the game and you had no real experience and no real accountability, you're just throwing darts. The real world is always far, far more complex than we can intellectualize. And especially all the interesting, fast-moving edge domains and problems, you can't get there without experience. So if you are smart and you iterate fast, so it's not even you put 10,000 hours into something, but you take 10,000 tries at something. If you are smart and you have a lot of quick iterations and you try to keep your emotions out of it, the people with the best judgment are actually among the least emotional. A lot of the best investors are considered almost robotic in that regard, but I wouldn't be surprised if even the best entrepreneurs often come across as unemotional. And there is this archetype of the passionate entrepreneur, and yet they have to care about what they're doing, but they also have to see very clearly what's actually happening. And the thing that prevents you from seeing what's actually happening are your emotions. Our emotions are constantly clouding our judgment. And in investing or in running companies or in building products or being an entrepreneur, emotions really get in the way. Emotions are what prevent you from seeing what's actually happening until you can no longer resist the truth of what's happening, until it becomes too sudden, and then you're forced into suffering, which is a breaking of this emotional fantasy that you would put together.
Try and connect some of these concepts. I would say that first, you're accountable for your judgment. Judgment is the exercise of wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience, and that experience can be accelerated through short iterations.
And the reason why a lot of the top investors, a lot of the value investors, if you read Jeremy Grantham or you read Warren Buffett, you read up on Michael Burry, these people sound like philosophers, or they are philosophers, or they're reading a lot of history books or science books. What are they doing? Shouldn't they be reading investment books? No, investment books are the worst place to learn about investment, because investment is a real world activity that is highly multivariate. All the advantages are always being competed away. It's always on the cutting edge. So what you actually just need is very, very broad-based judgment and thinking. And the best way to do that is to study everything, including a lot of philosophy. And philosophy also makes you more stoic, makes you less emotional, and so you make better decisions, you have better judgment. One simple thing is I go out on Twitter, and it seems like half of Twitter is outrage to something at all times. You can go within someone's Twitter feed and get at least some semblance of what it must be like to be in their head all the time. And the more outraged somebody is, I guarantee you, the worse their judgment is. If someone's constantly tweeting political outrage and seems like an angry person getting into fights, you don't want to hand this person the keys to your car, let alone the keys to your company.
So we covered the skills that you need to get rich. That was specific knowledge, accountability, leverage, judgment, and lifelong learning. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of working hard and valuing your time.
So no one is going to value you more than you value yourself. So you just have to set a very high personal hourly rate, and you have to stick to it. So even since when I was young, I just decided that I was worth a lot more than the market thought I was worth, but I started treating myself that way. So always factor your time into every decision. How much time does it take? Oh, it's going to take me an hour to get across town to get this thing. Well, I value myself at $100 an hour. That's throwing $100 out of my pocket. Am I going to do that? You buy something from Amazon, they screwed it up, you have to return it. Is it worth your time to return it? Is it worth the mental hassle? Keep in mind that you have less work hours, you have less mentally high output hours. Do you want to use them to run errands and solve little problems, or do you want to save them for the big stuff? All the great scientists were terrible at managing their household life. None of them had a clean, organized room, or made all their social events on time, or sent their thank you cards. You can spend your life however you want, but if you want to get rich, it has to be your number one overwhelming desire, which means that it has to come before anything else, which means you can't be penny pinching. This is what people don't understand. You can penny pinch your way to basic sustenance. You can keep your expenses low, maybe retire early and not spend too much, and that's perfectly valid. But we're here to talk about wealth creation. And if you're going to do that, then that has to be your number one overwhelming priority. So fast forward to your wealthy self and pick some intermediate hourly rate. For me, believe it or not, back when you could have hired me, which now obviously you can't, but back when you could have hired me, and this was true a decade ago or even 2 decades ago before I had any real money, my hourly rate, I used to say to myself over and over, is $5,000 an hour. Today, when I look back, really it was about $1,000 an hour. And of course, I still ended up doing stupid things like arguing with the electrician or returning the broken speaker, but I shouldn't have. And I did a lot less than any of my friends would. And I would make a theatrical show out of throwing something in the trash pile or or giving to Salvation Army rather than trying to return it, or handing something to people rather than trying to fix it. I would argue with my girlfriends and even today to my wife, like, I don't do that. That's not a problem that I solve. I still argue that with my mother when she hands me like little to-dos. I just don't do that. I would rather hire you an assistant. And this was true even when I didn't have money. Another way of thinking about something is that if you can outsource something or not do something for less than your hourly rate, outsource it or don't do it. So if you can hire someone to do it for less than your hourly rate, hire them. That even includes things like cooking. Now, you may want to eat your healthy home-cooked meals, but if you can outsource it, do that instead. And I know some people will say, well, what about the joy of life and what about getting it right just your way? Sure, you can do that, but you're not going to be wealthy because now you've made something else a priority. Paul Graham said it pretty well for Y Combinator Startups. He said you should be working on your product and getting your product market fit, and you should be exercising and eating healthy. Like, that's about it. That's kind of all you have time for while you're on this mission. So set a very high hourly aspirational rate for yourself and stick to it. And it should seem and feel absurdly high. If it doesn't, it's not high enough. And whatever you picked, my advice to you would be raise it. Like I said, for myself, even before I had money, for the longest time, I used $5,000 an hour. And if you extrapolate that out into what it looks like as an annual salary, it's multiple millions of dollars per year. Ironically, I actually think I've beaten it. When I look back, because I'm not the hardest working person, I'm actually kind of a lazy person. So I work through bursts of energy where I'm really motivated with something. So if I actually look at how much I've earned per actual hour that I put in, it's probably quite a bit higher than that. So let's talk about hard work. There's this battle that happens on Twitter a lot between should you work harder and should you not. Like David Hauser's on there saying like you're slave driving people, and Keith Raboy is always on there saying like no, all the great founders work their fingers to the bone. And they're talking past each other. First of all, they're talking about two different things. David is talking about employees in a lifestyle business, which is fine. Your number one thing in life, if you're doing that, is not getting wealthy. You have a job, you also have your family, you also have your life. But Keith is talking about the Olympics and startups. He's talking about the person going for the gold medal and trying to build a multi-billion-dollar public company. That person has to get everything right. They have to have great judgment. They have to pick the right thing to work on. They have to recruit the right team. And they have to work crazy hard because they're basically engaged in a competitive sprint. So if getting wealthy is your goal, you are going to have to work as hard as you can. But